which are both subjective.
Okay.
So in this portion, you had a list of symptoms that you scored, and you did the 0 to 3 numbers for that, and they converted your number scores to these gray bars.
Right.
If we read those across, we see circles and dots. The dots are circles filled in like highlighting if you reported a stronger symptom.
Mm-hmm.
And these are in columns to show which hormone could be causing a given symptom. It's just a grid.
Okay.
I'm going to skip this for a second and come into here.
Okay.
Before I break this out, I'm going to combat again. This is objective. This was measured levels without regard to symptoms, although we interpreted a little bit.
Right.
This is your self-reported symptom scores as if we had no levels. It's the opposite side of the coin.
Right. Subjective.
Okay. These are reported in green, yellow, red. We have no green. We have a lot of red.
Yeah.
So the first thing this tells us is this is not a one-button fix.
Right.
This is that reactive, interregulating relationships that we have. We cannot isolate or separate ovarian from adrenal, from thyroid, from insulin. It's all one playing field. These numbers are roughly the percent of symptoms you reported that correlate with that particular process.
Okay.
I'm just going to read from the bottom up and give you my words for what each one of those lines represents.
Okay.
So the bottom line, 39.5% of your symptoms say that estrogen and progesterone are not playing well together.
Okay.
The second line, 23% of your symptoms say that they're not playing well together because there's not enough progesterone.
Which we know because the cortisol is using the progesterone.
Right. The 41% of your symptoms says on many tissues you don't have enough effect of androgens, DHA, and testosterone.
Okay.
15% says that some tissues you're having more effect of testosterone and DHA than in others.
Okay.
62%, one of your biggest ones, says very weak adrenals, which we described over here. 43.6% says highly reactive with stress response, which we talked about over here. 38.5% says you are low thyroid at tissue level, not necessarily anything to do about your thyroid gland.
Okay.
And 62%, again, your single biggest one, says there's an insulin problem, insulin resistance issue.
Right.
So that's just the overview relative to the symptoms. If we broke out individual symptoms, then that's what this part is up here. So if we look at sleep disturbance,
Right.
we have 3 possible flags. One is the estrogen-progesterone relationships, which we showed over here.
Right.
One is low thyroid, but the reactivity of that is that high stress response. So someone who goes to sleep but then re-wakes without outside stimulation, that's a reactive adrenal process response when there's a lowered cortisol reserve, and it's a reactive response to a blood sugar drop, a glycemic stress while you're asleep. Did we talk about bears and chihuahuas before?
No.
Okay. Let me go there just for a second, then I'll break
Sure.
out and talk about stress from my perspective. So we have a cultural word, stress, that refers to things that happen in life that we can't control. And we have the word for the body, stress, same word, but a definition is really a little different. If it were Venn diagrams, this physiologic stress encompasses the entire amount of cultural stress plus more. It's just a bigger deal. So think of I wish we had a better word, but we still say stress, but it's a survival response. So using a couple of images to try to set that up. One is a hunter-gatherer sitting around the campfire. If the bear shows up, we got to fight or run. Kill the bear, get away from the bear, come back to the campfire, things are fine. We'll leave him sitting there and talk about the brain. Depending on who's lecturing, they say we have 3 brains or 3 structures in the brain: the old brain, midbrain, neocortex. So the old brain is a structure shared by everything with a spinal cord, so they call it the reptilian brain. The midbrain by all mammals, so they call it the mammalian brain. And the neocortex is human. So we live and think in the human brain. That's where our entire awareness is, but it's too slow for survival. If we had to stop to think what's rustling in the bushes, it's too late. Is that a bear or a rabbit? Don't matter anymore, it's gone, we're gone. So survival is reptilian, reactive and instinctive. There's no time to think, and we can't control it by thinking about it. It's deeper than that. And it's very, very basic stuff, and I would say it's the sum of threats. So breaking it into oversimplistic areas, physical stressors, which is injury, trauma, pain, physical overwork. Emotional stressors, which is the cultural stress, job schedule, relationship, money conflict, kids, cell phones, email accounts, other people's demand on our time. It's also glycemic stress, and under that would be things like chemical stressors as well, toxins and such. But the biggest part of that is just how we regulate blood sugars. Because if blood sugar drops too low for the brain, we go into coma. The sum of these is a bear, because we only have one response, and that's exactly the same if we have a Diet Coke or break a leg. No difference whatsoever. Biochemically, we are hunter-gatherers. We just live in cities, and most of our bears don't have fur. Today, if we get away from the bear, from the big thing, we can't find the campfire because we got this pack of chihuahuas at our heels all day long, chronic, unrelenting minor stressors.
Right.
So if we're not running from bears, we're kicking chihuahuas. That's my bears and chihuahuas thing. Okay.
Right.
So I think what we get into, to come back and give a visual for what we talked about over here as a weakened but reactive system. To try to make a visual, I have to have an imaginary line. So assume that to be the minimum adrenal response for survival.
Okay.
If that's our minimum, we should be living up here, managing the variations of life as they happen. And we typically think we are. I think between bears and chihuahuas, we're managing those things, but we're losing margin through the years because we never have full recovery time. And then we have major stress events. Finish school, get married, have a child, have a job change, move somewhere, have a grief issue, have an injury, whatever it might be. Things that come along and kick us in the butt. Nothing ever kicks us back up. That's fingernails up the cliff. Very slow process of recovery. I think we're at risk of crossing that imaginary line below which there is no minor stress. But we are survivors, and so we push to get back to survival, which weakens the system more. So as I exaggerate this, next time I have to push harder, which weakens me more. The weaker the system gets, the more reactive the system becomes, because we are survivors. It's doing everything possible to continue to get us back to survival. We can push far enough that no matter how hard we drive, we're not able to fully compensate anymore. Once we're down to that point, we're having trouble getting out of bed in the morning, our energy is really low, maybe lower at certain times of day. In this phase is where we might see increases in heart rate, re-waking at night, anxiety, hot flashes,
Everything I have.
all the types of symptoms you have, right? So as we saw